In today's video we will be going over the Conquest vs Invincible fight. This takes place in Compendium number 2, issue number 61 of the Invincible comic book. Let's begin. We start off with Invincible recovering from the destruction the variants brought to his planet, when, all of a sudden, Conquest appears, floating in the sky. Conquest informs Mark that he has been appointed as the Viltrumite agent for Earth, meaning that he is tasked with preparing Earth for the eventual Viltrumite takeover. However, if Mark fails to complete this task, Conquest will take his position. And if Mark decides to oppose Conquest or Viltrumite rule, he will get killed. Mark, however, plays a rather stupid move and just tells Conquest that it's not a good time. Conquest, upon hearing this, tells Mark that they anticipated his resistance, so they brought him specifically. Unfortunately for Mark, Conquest is found to be the best Viltrumite warrior in existence, meaning that if Mark wishes to resist him, he will surely perish. Mark insults Conquest, saying that maybe he doesn't understand, and that he caused all of the destruction around him. Mark then says that all he wants to do is to punch something as hard as he physically can. Conquest, hearing this, initiates the fight between the two. Mark and Conquest then fly towards each other at intense speeds, clashing together, causing a sonic boom that sends people around them flying into the sky. As they attempt to push one another in the opposite direction, Conquest ends up succeeding in launching Mark right through a large skyscraper, making the skyscraper collapse and crash into the ground. Conquest then drops Mark onto the ground, telling him that if he was Anissa, he would be telling Mark about how the Viltrum Empire would turn Earth into a utopia and that it would be futile to resist. He then says that he wants Mark to resist him, he wants Mark to fight back against him, stating that he enjoys murder. He then begins saying that he wishes to feel his fist drenched in blood, but is swiftly cut off by Mark punching him in the face. Conquest then laughs and says that he's getting close to doing any real damage to him. Mark doesn't respond, he instead gives him a cold stare before grabbing him and plunging him into a skyscraper. The skyscraper collapses, causing heavy debris to fall onto Conquest. Conquest, however, just brushes the debris off himself easily. Mark was unfortunately unable to get himself out of the debris. Conquest, upon seeing this, picks Mark up from the neck and out from the debris and tells him he wants more of the fighting. Mark smashes his fists against Conquest's temples, causing him to compliment Mark. Mark then says that it was just a warm-up before continuously punching Conquest up so far that it brings their battle into space. As Mark takes a break from beating Conquest, they have an intense stare at each other before Conquest launches towards Mark and sends the battle back into Earth. Mark breaks free and begins punching Conquest once again. Conquest jumps out of the range of Mark's blows and gives Mark another intense stare before stating that he's had enough games. He then launches his fist into Mark's eye, shattering his goggles in the process. The story cuts to Mark's house, where his little brother, Oliver, is watching the news about their battle. Oliver, fearing for his older brother's life, makes the decision to meet up to the battle and help Mark. It then cuts back to the battle, where Mark is recovering from the intense blow from Conquest. Conquest then barges from out of the ground underneath Mark and kicks him into the sky. Oliver then arrives at the battle and tries to fly towards Conquest but is unable to due to him having less flight ability than Conquest. Conquest then deals another heavy blow towards Mark, sending him crashing through another skyscraper before flying through it himself to continue chasing Mark. Mark then smashes into the ground, sending rocks and concrete flying around him as dust clouds form. As he gets up, he spots Conquest about to fly straight through him. In a last-ditch effort, he pleads to Conquest to stop, to which Conquest follows, stopping 1 millisecond away from killing him. Mark then continues pleading with Conquest to just listen to him for a second. Conquest, however, just asks Mark if he's crazy before crushing him into the ground, sending more concrete debris flying into the sky. Conquest then scolds Mark, saying he's an idiot for thinking that he'd actually stop and listen to him, also stating that he's having the time of his life. Conquest then tells Mark to continue fighting back before Oliver comes and pummels Conquest into the ground, forming a small crater in the process. Conquest then easily grabs Oliver's arm and asks who he is before Mark comes and kicks Conquest away from Oliver, as well as telling Oliver to escape while he still can. Oliver insists that he is just trying to help, but Mark tells Oliver that Conquest will kill him. Oliver then leaves as Conquest launches himself into Mark. Conquest tells Mark he's an idiot for telling his only way of surviving to leave. Conquest then smashes Mark into the ground before yelling at him, asking where his Viltrumite heart is, and that he won't believe that Mark has won until he sees it beating in his hands. Mark then bashes his head into Conquest, finally causing him to bleed. Conquest is pleased by this. Mark then begins repeatedly beating Conquest. However, Conquest easily grabs Mark's hand mid-punch and tells him that if that's all the strength he has, it's not gonna end well for him. We then cut to the basement of the Pentagon, where Cecil is furious, yelling and running into people in the process. Cecil then enters the main room and reports to DA Sinclair, hoping that he's made progress with the variant reanimator. DA Sinclair then brings the bad news, stating that it will most likely take a long time since their body is so dense it resembles solid steel. Cecil is terrified by this news. We then cut to the hospital where Eve is being taken care of as the TV broadcasts news about the battle. Eve then wakes up and sees the fight on TV and decides to help Mark. The hospital staff and her parents urge her to stay and recover due to her broken legs, but she makes the decision to leave anyway. We then cut back to the battle between Conquest and Mark, where Conquest is gripping Mark's hand while stating that he's up to now just been playing with Mark. He then smashes Mark into the ground over and over again before throwing him and flying into him, digging him into the ground as he flies. He then stops and gets up and prepares to deal the final blow before Oliver comes back and kicks Conquest so hard he flips over. Oliver tries to pick Mark up from the debris. He also says that it will be easy to defeat Conquest since he's thousands of years old. Conquest, however, explains that with Viltrumites, being old is not equal to being weak, and that the older they become, the stronger they grow. Oliver thinks that Conquest is lying and says that it's a bunch of bullcrap before getting cut off as Conquest smacks Mark flying away, telling Mark to take a break as he focuses on Oliver. Conquest then punches Oliver in his left cheek, knocking out a tooth in the process. Conquest then grabs Oliver's right arm and dislocates his shoulder. Conquest then grabs Oliver's legs and lifts him up before starting to slowly rip him in half. Mark regains consciousness and flies towards Conquest in an attempt to save his brother. Fortunately, Mark smashes into Conquest before his brother is killed, although Oliver still suffered intense injuries. Conquest easily brushes the attack off and grabs Mark's left shoulder and delivers an intense blow, shattering his other goggle in the process. Cecil then opens a portal next to Oliver and brings him into a hospital. We then get shown multiple panels showing people close to Mark worried that Mark won't survive. Conquest then throws Mark so fast towards the ocean that he begins skipping off of it like a rock. Conquest then holds Mark by the back of the neck and smashes him through a naval battleship, causing a massive, fiery, explosion. He then brings Mark underwater and drags his face across the ocean floor. We then get shown multiple panels of Mark getting smashed through different objects. Mark then punches Conquest, setting himself free. Eve then arrives and forms a wall in front of Conquest's trajectory, making Conquest smash his face into it. Mark pleads to Eve, begging her to leave. Eve, however, ignores his pleas and attempts to begin a fight with Conquest. Mark, however, rams into Conquest in an attempt to stop Eve from getting harmed. Conquest, however, easily breaks Mark's left leg with a single swipe. Eve is distracted by this, and this allows Conquest to cause a sonic boom, shattering the protective sphere around him formed by Eve. Conquest then punches Eve in the face, knocking out several teeth. He then stabs through her chest with his arm, making a hole straight through her torso. He then rips his arm back out and lets Eve fall down onto the floor. Mark sees this and flies under her to pick her up. Mark then slowly delivers her to the floor and pleads for Cecil to come and save her, to no avail. Conquest then watches over them, and after a long discussion, Mark and Conquest fly towards each other again. As they collide fists, Mark's right arm breaks and Conquest's left robotic arm shatters. Mark then deals a blow to Conquest's right cheek. Conquest, however, immediately retaliates and grapples onto Mark, attempting to fly away with him before Mark bites a chunk of his right shoulder off, making Conquest lose grip on him. Mark flies back at Conquest and deals a heavy blow to his face, knocking him onto the floor. As this happens, however, Eve begins transforming into a more powerful version of herself. As Mark's beating Conquest, he gets distracted by Eve's transformation, allowing Conquest to uppercut. Eve saves Mark by shooting a powerful laser towards Conquest, burning a large portion of his skin off in the process. Conquest, stunned by the pain of the attack, falls over onto the floor. Eve then immediately passes out after the attack and returns to her regular state. Conquest, however, gets back up and tells Mark that he'll make sure that she's really dead next time. Mark then flies towards Conquest, yelling that Conquest will not touch her before dealing an intense blow to the face, shattering some teeth in the process. Mark then deals multiple more blows to Conquest's face before Conquest grabs Mark's arm and breaks it. Mark, with no other way to attack Conquest, begins smashing his head into him repeatedly, smashing Conquest's face. After this, Mark's adrenaline wears off and he falls to the ground. He spots Eve and crawls towards her, allowing them to connect again. Finally, Conquest is dead, or is he?